Hey guys, welcome to the Genshimation stream. Today we're actually looking at Catalyst users in Genshin Impact, and this episode I think we're going to be looking at Mona. Thank you for the follow, Red Frost. Hi eFuzzy4, welcome to the stream. What is happening? Today we are looking at Catalyst users in Genshin Impact, and we are looking at their animations in terms of their character, what animation techniques they are using. And ultimately, we're basically just doing a really just blind jump in, a blind deep dive. Wow, thank you for the Prime subscription, Groovity. I really appreciate it. Okay, so yeah, we're looking at Mona, right? So if we're comparing Mona back to Klee, Mona, I'm not 100% familiar with her character, mainly just because I don't play with her as often. I recently just got her as a pity roll, I believe, on one of my banners. But I think we can probably just assume from the get-go that she's someone that is very, very, very proud or confident in her abilities, right? At least from the stories that we were experiencing, she's someone that is pretty confident in her astrology, or her reading of the stars and stuff like that, space and whatnot. So in this situation, she's confident, she's cool, and her magic is a mixture of water manipulation. So for example, Klee was all about throwing physical bombs of fire, right? And Mona, on the other hand, is, besides having big thighs and whatnot, she is someone that has a very good mastery over her abilities. So the question would be then, how do we approach animating someone like that? And one, you can do very, very strong poses, very cool flourishes. I think it's interesting too let's see, what is unique about Mona? So here's the first thing, right? You can see here that one of the things for Mona that we can contrast with Klee is launching physical objects, right? So she has a lot more of these big poses where she's gonna lob something, or something where she has to jump and she has to put in a lot of effort. But it's interesting because for Mona, you can see here, at least from the side view, right? She comes down. So here's her idol. It comes down here, a lot lower. But you can see that in terms of her route, it's not going forward or back very much, right? I think that's one of the big things that you can notice with casters, as well as with versus the Claymore users that we saw last week. Claymore users definitely have to use their body more and push forward as they're swinging to create force and motion, right? Whereas a lot of magic users, they don't have to move. They just swing their arms around and then throw stuff because the energy that they're casting doesn't have mass. And in this situation, you can see when she's casting, a lot of it just doesn't feel very heavy, right? It feels much more fluid and light and agile. So from a physicality standpoint, you actually basically see that she doesn't have to move very much. And first pose, hand comes out, boom. That's cool. Second pose, foot kicks out. Theoretically, if they wanted, they could have kicked the foot out for contact point first. But right now, the 2 feet are both sliding, but that's okay. Comes up, weight is on this foot. I actually really like that line that they have right here. This line is very, very nice. Getting this S kind of thing, and her arms here. Woo! It's quite nice. And I think in this situation for flow, if you're talking about a character that does water, I think it's very, very appropriate to have Mona do stuff that feels very watery, very flowy, has a lot of flow. If we remember looking at Avatar, Last Airbender, all those stances and fighting for bending elements and stuff, they all equate pretty well to a specific martial arts style that fits the element specifically, right? Water, I believe, if I can remember correctly, follows a lot of Tai Chi, which is basically all about manipulating and moving your energy around, which works very, very well for water, right? So she has an antic here where she comes up a little bit. So as she comes up, you're going to expect her to go down. Her arms are crossed. And again, what we want to do here is we want to have the final pose be the opposite of all these things, right? Because the more you can build contrast, the more powerful it feels. So our expectation here is her root's going to go down, her arm's going to come out. Hua, release of energy. Hua, release of energy. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. One, she can totally do something where her legs are like this and her root is like way further down, which is like much more involved, much more action oriented. But you know, Mona's gotta show off a little bit. So she maintains her, I don't know, what is this? Her modeling pose in this spot. Keeps her legs straight. Goes up, down, has a rebound. Man, her attitude. I don't know if she's like facing forward looking at this or like the hat just has so much wiggle on it that's covering her face, but oh, she is looking down. Fuck. She's so like, sorry, I can't draw, but she's, that's the horrible face. Oh no. She's like contemplative. Neat. Comes down, does a spin, 180 backwards, then she disappears, comes out of this cool. That's a very cool effect, right? You're having this the shape here, but then you're able to see a texture in the background that's rendering. Boom, space water time. Cool. What's neat about this too? Just track. She's going this way. She's facing this, facing backwards as she spins this way. When she comes out, if you're tracking the frames, she should be this side coming out this way. Still rotating the same direction, right? You want that continuity. Cool. So she comes out. She has a lot of jiggle stuff too. Is that her hair? If that's her hair. Does a nice landing. Now it's always interesting because like a lot of times when we're doing animation, obviously for video games, you try to make your poses look really good from all angles, right? Now this pose in the front, it only reads really well from certain points. This is a really cool entrance, but I think you can see here from the back that you can see a lot more of this, like, oh, you know, the knees are in, you can see the foot, the negative foot, arms out like this. This is a much easier pose to read. This one is a little bit less interesting because if you were to do it, it would be nice to have the foot here. But since you need to keep track of all three views and all that stuff, and in 3D, it's one of those things where you gotta work with it. I think it would be nicer if this arm came up a little bit higher, but it does look higher from this perspective, right? So higher here would be nice. Comes down. When he comes down, if the hands can come up a little bit more to sort of react to coming down. But on the side view, it's really nice. You have a very straight and a very angle. That's always a lot of times if you're a guy or a girl and you're coming out of hops or jumps or attacks or anything, if you can have a contrast between your two legs, one straight, one bent, that's always more appealing than having both straight or both bent. Granted, there are certain situations where you want them to be both straight or both bent, but in most other cases, if you can add interest to your pose by having asymmetry, great. There is argument around twinning where I feel like the rule to avoid twinning 100% of the time is unnecessary, because sometimes when we as people are speaking or doing things, twinning is a very natural act. Now, is it 100% identical on left and right? No. But the general act of your left and right side doing the same thing together, it's very common. So in some cases, it's okay to do it, I think. Just be cognizant of when you're doing it, and that if you do it, it is an intentional choice. I think we have this one from one angle in the back. This is her empowered auto. I think it's pretty interesting too, where it's like when we have this blend, for some reason, there's always some motion blur that kicks in here. But anyway, right here she comes down, very cool. Gets ready for a spin. Again, we talked about this a little bit, but when you do the spin, as long as everything is sort of matching, and then you have all this like secondary stuff that does the woo 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 spin stuff, then generally you're okay. But in most cases, you can still see here that the feet and these knees are the ones that are lagging behind the most. The head is leading, chest, so head goes first, chest second, hips third, knees fourth, and then I guess feet go fifth or something, right? You can see that here, right? When she's coming down, feet plant, head is moving, then chest. And in this situation, it's kind of hard to frame, like, they're not going all one by one by one. So if you have like 6 different frames, you're not just going to do head first, then this, then this, then this, then you're not going to do head, chest, hip, feet, and legs and feet, right? You're not gonna do them on frames, right? In the motion part, you have to have a pose that communicates that this is going first and these are following all at the same time, right? If it were that easy where we could just say, okay, the first thing that leads is going to happen on the first frame and the second thing is going to happen on the second frame. The problem is a lot of times it's much more nuanced than that. In real life, things do happen in a sequence, but they happen in a sequence very, 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 very quickly. And unfortunately, I believe a 30th of a second or a 24th of a second is not enough delineation to sort of communicate that, right? So that is why posing is very important to learn in terms of understanding how do you communicate motion in just one pose, right? So for example, you could say, okay, so these are moving at what, like 30% right now, and this is like 40%, this is like 60%, then this is like maybe like 80%. Like if we're just being very simplistic here, then that needs to be baked into the pose in terms of communicating what's happening, right? Now, obviously in motion, all these values are changing all at the same time, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, the core concept here is that you need to follow these guidelines for when you're working in terms of how you want to do a move, right? Now, for Mona, theoretically, if you wanted, you could do her feet first, right? If they wanted to, she could animate with the feet going first and then the root and then the chest. Physically, that may not always be the most sensical, but if you're a magic user and let's say you're doing like kicks or doing other things that are being motivated through your feet, perfectly fine. In this situation, they chose to do everything more with the upper body and then the hands that are like doing all these like manipulation techniques. Because right here, for example, she comes down, does a spin. And then what she does is when she does a spin, her root is starting here, comes down, and comes back up. But when it comes up, it goes higher to create energy. So the spin can be sort of thought as like a catalyst for creating more energy and more excitement. Comes up. So you can see that when she's down, most of the poses are like Z's, compressed. When she comes up, it's straight, or more straight, right? Obviously, you don't want to be like completely straight like a stick, right? You want sort of like more straight silhouette, but obviously add things to create interest, right? So for example, in this situation, you have straight leg, but slightly bent, so you get a little bit of this nice angle, hips cocked to one side. Here's the body straight, head is basically above sort of like center of mass, and then you have the twist. You have twist on the body, and my arrow is completely horrible. So then you have hand out here, right? And this all came from this motion of spinning. So her right arm is in front to the left because that's the finish pose, and her left arm is behind on the behind. You have your effects happening. Boom. So we go from Z into straight into Z again, right? And that's the sequence. And you can tell also, for example, she does a spin for tracking, spin this way, up like this, back into this. Wow, those don't really communicate anything, do they? Okay, so again, we're talking about this, spinning this way. Hopefully that reads better. Spinning this way, boom, comes up to fully channel the energy, boom, and then basically because she's kind of twisted all the way around again, she needs to unwind it, right? Boom, so something a little bit more at like a rest pose that feels a little bit more stable, right? Boom. So she comes out from facing this way to facing this way. Nice. She has a lot of secondary stuff, lots of tassels and lots of stuff. This is her E, but Mona being Mona, does another spin. Woo! Portals backwards. Up, girls again, with the knees inside. Does she float there? She does. She's floating. I didn't even notice that. Oop. He floats and then comes back down. Interesting. Cool. And her Castaway there is actually the same for, I think, all the characters. It's not unique. And there's something interesting with Mona, I think, that a lot of times for a lot of her abilities, she always has this thing where it's like forward and then her arms come out like this. Kind of like the explosion. I think it's, I'm not sure 100%, but it's kind of like, I guess, water. If you're doing water explosions or something, like, it's nice to have like, kind of like splashing out. I'm not sure. Something about the pose kind of communicates that kind of feeling to me, I feel like. But there's a lot, she has a lot of those poses where it's like bent knees, kind of like intentionally forward facing thing, but then her hands are out and it's like, hello. Wow, what did I draw? It looks really wonky. But again, this is her ultimate cast. Perfect chance to do really nice poses with the hands. You can see kind of how low poly it is to save on rendering and save on engine power. But again, this is perfectly a very, very nice hand pose. I wonder if they have, how many bones they have for this, and if they have like bones here to contort the, bend the hand inside and here. I wonder. It would be nice to be able to have that kind of like flexibility for something like this. Ooh, the hand. Perfect. Okay, so that's nice too, right? Hands are open. You have all the negative space. Hands come here. You get something a little bit more graphic, right? Very straight here, but then a couple of this complicated edges, but the whole hand is basically a palm. It's really nice. It's kind of cute too. Here, you see the face. Comes down, can't see the face. Simplifies the read until you zoom in. And this is perfect too. Like outside of the action, I think when you have a fixed camera like this and you're doing something to camera and you have the power to sort of dictate everything. So you can see here, her face, she comes from here where you're doing something very like 1/3 and then you have like your power element here. But then you'll notice that what happens is the character moves to the left, moves to the right, and then moves to the left. So you're using your screen space to communicate motion and like intention as well as like power, right? If you're trying to do an action from right to left, moving the character from right to left, even if they themselves in the 3D space are not moving, if you can use the camera to help communicate that the character on the canvas is moving in a specific motion, viewers who are viewing it from this perspective will also get that motion, right? So here, as we zoom in, we push her more to the left. And obviously this gets bigger or whatnot, but we zoom in, and as she's like, we're zooming in, we're tilting the camera this way, I believe, in this motion, or she's rotating this way. I'm not 100% sure because I don't have background information. But you can see that, for example, right here, we zoom in, first off, into the center, so we can focus on her, right? A lot of times things that need to be focused on happen in the center first. She gets shifted to the right as we're zooming in, right? And this is where good arcs and good flow comes in, right? Ooh. She's on the right side now, at least on the right half. Boom. And then she like comes this way to the left. And then we cut back out. Dang. It goes so fast. I do think if we're tracking the head though, this is where I'm not 100% sure how much of it is actually in game at the moment, or if like this thing that we see is sort of pre-rendered and it's playing on top. Because you can see here, if we track the eyes, or just like, let's just use this as a tracking mechanism. It's right here, and then it comes down, right? And then now the head's here. So we're going from this point to this point to this point to this point. And unfortunately, that's not like the most smooth. So it'd be like, this frame would be better if it was up here. Or something, like right here or something, I feel like. Do a different color. 2, 3. To follow this, right? So you want her face to track like that or something, right? But no matter. This is one of those few chances where you, cause see, we're looking at a lot of these animations from the front. And in game, most of the time you're not seeing our animations from the front. You're always seeing it from the back. But, you know, these are the chances where in these ultimate animation casts that you get to see the character up close and personal, and it's always really, 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 really exciting. Because it's new and fancy, right? Anyway, the effects are really cool. Cool. Those were just some surface level observations on Mona's attacks. Again, I didn't really 100% prepare anything specific before this. I just basically said I want to look at some of the Catalyst animations and just talk about them. I'm sure there's a lot more deep diving we could do in terms of really the specificity in acting choices and poses. But at least for a 20-minute kind of just, oh, look at this. That's sort of these are my first reactions, if you will. All right, I got a couple more going.